This Governance and Audit Committee meeting. These papers were published originally in March, so time has obviously moved on quite considerably since March, and we'll be going through some papers which are quite old. However, obviously actions have been taken since then. So first of all, have we got any apologies for absence?
Yes, from Andy Clayton. So it's proposed that you take the chair in his absence if the committee are in agreement.
Is everybody okay with that? If anybody else wants to chair, I'm happy for that to happen as well. But obviously Andy, unfortunately, is not able to be with us today, and he's our chair, he's our independent chair, and he's very, very good at what he does. So we'll be missing him today, but hopefully we'll be back at the next meeting. So in the meantime, we shall carry on. Any declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests?
I've not received any.
Exclusion of the press and public? I don't think we have any opportunity, no. Any reason to do that, do we? Any of the papers, so that's fine. Minutes of the meeting of Governance and Audit Committee held on 23rd of January. Has anybody got any comments or questions on those? Not seeing any indications, so we'll carry on. So those therefore I take as a correct record of that meeting, if people are okay with that. Next is the first substantive paper we have, which is Internal Audit Progress Report. So this is on page 7 of your notes and papers, if you want to turn to that. This is also an opportunity to welcome Bron, who is our new internal audit manager. Welcome, Bron.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hinchcliffe. It does feel a bit dated, does the paper, but we did try and put some update points in just to make sure that we weren't making people redo everything, but hopefully it gives the current position. There was just one or two things that I wanted to highlight, and then it's much easier if I take questions. But particularly just since we all went into lockdown, the committee just needs to be aware that Audit have been trying to provide some emergency help to teams that are either struggling with capacity or with particular issues around not being able to have the right skills in place to do certain things. So we're helping where we can other teams. It is a time limited thing just to reflect the current crisis situation, so it's not something we envisage doing long term. And we are not ceasing audit work in the interim. We are continuing to complete the 19-20 plan and starting to scope up the new work. But when we come on to look at the proposed audit plan for next year, our starting point is to get an agreement to that plan so we can then start actually undertaking the work against that, and indeed looking at reviewing it where it needs to be reviewed in light of the current circumstances. But it is important that the committee knows that we are providing some help and assistance elsewhere where our particular skills can do that. So unless there's anything else you particularly want me to cover, I will open it up for questions.
No, that's fine, thank you. We've all got the report in front of us. Obviously, there are a few issues in there identified with HR and how the policies are being enacted in the workplace. Obviously, that there may be people from the press online as well at the moment. So obviously, there's already been questions about those items there. So can you just sort of explain how those items have been cleared up and whether there is a requirement for renewed training for some of our staff who seem to have missed a few things?
I think yes to most of the above. So the issues have been dealt with in part through the directorates taking responsibility for making sure that managers are aware of the requirements they have to follow in relation to the HR policies as they currently stand. But in tandem with that, the HR team are working to roll out the HR strategy, which incorporates some quite significant revisions to corporate policies around HR. So it's also being tackled on all fronts. But I think we did highlight as part of the work that one of the big things that the HR team needs to bear in mind as they roll out new policies is the awareness raising the training that needs to come alongside that. So we do think that's an important feature going forward. We did feel that there was quite a bit of confusion out in the business with some potentially quite dated policies, and it's timely that the HR strategy is currently being rolled out. And I think just before the lockdown started, HR were doing some strategy update sessions and awareness raising sessions for the business. And my understanding is that they are going to continue to do that as they roll out the policy. I can see Angela nodding, so that is correct. So it's a combination of managers being somewhat confused, perhaps not being completely au fait with the policies in the way that they should have been, which hopefully the directorates have now addressed by doing some of that training themselves and getting some of that awareness raising up. There's also something for us to think about in terms of second lines of defence and the amount of checking we do to make sure that things are in place. And we started this process of doing more compliance checking to build up that kind of picture of assurance. So hopefully all being tackled on all fronts, I think, is the answer.
So obviously staff do need to, the policies are quite straightforward. They do need to follow them properly, and there is some quality control on that. So it's just a basic fundamental managerial responsibility that people need to take. And hopefully that will be communicated to not just to HR, but to all managers who need to take that responsibility. Any other councillors who are wishing to comment? Please, I think we'll have to raise your hand. It might be easier. Yes, Councillor Hall.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to ask if we've got any update at all on page 19 on the disaster recovery plan. There were some comments in there that we should have something in place by the end of March.
Yeah, I mean, before I let you comment, obviously we've had a disaster which has been COVID, and actually I think it's worked pretty well, to be quite honest, in terms of people being able to work from home. So, but yes, by all means, if you want to answer that question from Councillor Hall.
Yes. Shall I do that from management rather than from internal audit?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, we're in the midst of a significant technology program, and one of those work streams is going to be a complete overhaul of all the disaster recovery. However, we already have existing policies, and the recommendation highlighted in here was about bringing that together more formally as an interim policy whilst we waited for the bigger piece of work to be done. So that interim disaster recovery policy has been put together. It's due to be just formally signed off, but it is a working document. It has been used and was successfully utilised, as the chair has said, in enabling everybody based in the office to literally go overnight to start working from home with access to all the technology. So it is in place and working. It will continue to be improved and enhanced, and learn from experience as we go.
How many people do we have working from home, Angela?
400. We have everybody who was office based is working from home. We obviously have some people in the bus stations who are required to be at the bus station, but everybody who was previously at a desk in an office is at home with access to full systems capability and all the networks, all the files, and all the work they need to do.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Excellent. I popped out there. I seem to have come off and come back on again. We've got all our staff working for, and that was done overnight, was it, with the IT kit that we have?
Yes, we heard the government a message on the Monday night, put the message out on Tuesday. Handful of people came in to tidy bits up, but everybody went home immediately with the laptops that they'd been provided with.
Okay. And I believe we've increased our bandwidth, haven't we, recently as well, I think?
We have. We obviously had some initial concerns that we hadn't tested everybody working from home in full. We had done some trials, and overnight we trialed everybody working from home, and it worked. There were a couple of stutters, but we've increased the bandwidth, and at the moment it appears to be working fine for everybody. Had no complaints.
Okay, so it's not until you get a true disaster you realise how well your recovery plan works, is it really, I suppose?
Absolutely.
So, congratulations to our IT team that they've managed to get everybody up and running, and it is business as usual, regardless of the fact that we have to have virtual meetings now as opposed to in-person meetings. So thank you to them for supporting us through this difficult time.
You're frozen, Susan.
Sorry, Councillor Pandore, I froze there. Did you indicate?
Yeah, no, that's it. I was just saying you're frozen, but it's not, you've unfrozen.
I've come back. Did you have a question, Councillor Pandore?
No, I was just wondering, you're frozen. I'm all right.
No, fine. Any further questions then? I think that's a no. So there's a few people frozen, but I think that's a no. With that then, I think just looking at the report again, let me just get the report up in front of me. What do we have as recommendation?
The recommendation here is to consider the report, which I think you have done.
Okay. So with those provisos, it sounds like the issues that we identified in part of the internal audit have now all been sorted. Is that the case, Brom?
When you talk about the issue, do you mean in relation to the HR specifically?
Yes.
Yes, so we've had assurances from all of the directorates that they've agreed their actions. I think that was the outstanding bit coming into this meeting. But we've had confirmation from policy, they've agreed and implemented the actions. Melanie's just from the delivery directorate just needs to confirm that they have actioned all of theirs, but they had submitted their proposed corrective action. So I'm not anticipating that anybody is in a position now where their managers haven't been brought up to speed and haven't been basically held to account for delivering on the current HR policies. So yeah, so a good rollout of the HR strategy now with some training, and hopefully what we should see when we come to do the next bit of compliance work around this is a much more bright picture.
So I think what we need to see from HR is that there's regular training and updates sent round to staff, and there's some regular checking in there from an audit and governance point of view, so we can action that. The regularity probably needs to be discussed, but every manager should have regular updated training on what their responsibilities are as a manager. Then things run a lot more smoothly. So can we make sure that happens, please?
We will. I'll take that as an action.
Thank you. Otherwise, are we all right with the paper in front of us? Yes, I'm not seeing any dissent, so I take that as assent. So thank you very much, everybody. Moving on now to the audit plan for 2020-2021. So this is Bron as well, I believe.
Yep. So again, things have moved on quite significantly since this plan was put together. But in order for us to do any meaningful revisions against the plan, we need an agreed plan in the first place. It's still the right plan, given the amount of consultation we did both within the organisation and externally. So we are confident that they are the right areas on the plan. We just know that because of current circumstances and the fact that a devolution deal was announced just after these papers were submitted, we know that there's some stuff we need to do more specifically. There is an additional paper at the end of this meeting around the adult education budget. That's one area particularly where we are going to have to give some more audit attention to, but I think that paper makes that clear, and we can deal with that then. But so in terms of the plan, if the committee want to ask any questions, we did have quite a full discussion at the January meeting where the committee raised the areas they wish to see included in the plan, which have been and are all represented there. So it's a case of whether anybody has anything that they feel is significantly omitted from the plan as it currently stands and needs to be added, or whether the committee is in fact happy to agree that this is the right plan for combined authority for this next year.
So any comments, questions? You say we've seen this before, this paper, and has our politicians seen this plan before?
I've not seen this version of the plan. They had the discussion at the last meeting where we put sort of the proposals together around what methodology we were going to use to draw the plan together, and we debated content at that last meeting. So what the committee asked for has been included, but we've also subsequently included things from the senior leadership team in the combined authority, heads of service, and we've done some benchmarking with colleagues in other mayoral combined authorities as it happened. Bit of prescience there, I think. So we are confident that it is a good comprehensive plan. What we will need to think about is whether we do need to make some adjustments given the current circumstances, how feasible it is to look at all of this in the current climate. But we can't really review the plan until we have an agreed plan.
I mean, the two major things obviously we need to be focused on this year are obviously COVID response. So anything that inhibits our ability to respond to that crisis has to be a priority in terms of being audited. So we need to unblock anything. And secondly, of course, our progression towards a mayoral devolution deal next year. So those, in my mind, are the two most important things that we need to focus on. So the internal audit needs to make sure that our organisation is able to deliver those. And that we have the right resource in the right places to deliver. It sounds like all our staff are online and therefore are able to work fully from home, and therefore our work rate shouldn't dip a great deal. But obviously we've taken on a lot more work at the moment. All the business support services are working at full pelt. We've got people being moved into answering phones to support businesses who are in need of help. So all that, I dare say, leaves the business support function itself perhaps a little bit more limited than it was prior to this outbreak.
I think that's a fair assessment, and it also means that we need to think carefully about timing for our reviews, when it's going to be possible to do certain things and when they're going to have the most benefit for the business. But those are conversations that are ongoing. So yeah, I think it's just a case of coming back to the committee, particularly for the July meeting, I think, when we have a better idea about what the MCA work streams look like and how we might provide some specific audit work around those areas. So yeah, I'd envisage a conversation around those specifically in July.
Okay. Any more questions or comments from others around the table, virtual table, albeit? No, I mean, I think we're happy with the plan as it stands. It's just, notwithstanding, obviously, this is a changeable environment, and therefore, is this something we need to revisit then in July? Will we normally have this paper coming back, would we, to every meeting, just to remind us about what the internal audit plan is and whether we need to review it in light of the changing environment we're working in at the moment?
Yes, definitely. And like I say, I think it will be a particularly pertinent discussion in July when we just have a bit more understanding, especially around the MCA stuff. We might want to make some more specific audit resources targeted at specific work streams at that meeting. So it'll be a conversation, I think, that will be best progressed then.
Okay, fine, lovely. So looking at this, I think we're all happy with that as it stands, notwithstanding, you know, the changes that we might have to see in July, but let's review that then. So I think we're happy with that. Is that the recommendation there? We've fed back what our concerns are. Yes, so we're okay with that. Thank you very much. Moving on now to item number 7, which is external audit progress report. And I believe we've got Mark Alterside here to present on that from Mazars, who's our external auditor.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, could I just briefly cover that there's a couple of items in the report. One is around the audit fee. The other is indeed the report from Mazars about the work they've been doing on the external audit. A little bit of context, a number of you may be aware that there are the deadlines for submitting final approved accounts have been relaxed this year in response to COVID. We have agreed with the auditors to try to stick to the original timescales, because given, as you alluded to before, the amount of work this year, it would be good to get the accounts closed, cleared and approved as quickly as we can. So notwithstanding the ability to stretch those timescales, we're still going to try and meet the original approval timetable. So Mazars did start their work pre-lockdown, and you've got some appendices in this report that are around the some of the discussion around audit fees, which have come out where we expected them to at the same level of audit fee. But there's also a report from Mazars, which Mark Addison may like to present for you, answer questions on.
Okay. Mark?
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear?
Yes, you're a little bit faint.
I'll move a bit closer. I don't think you. Okay, I'm not going to dwell too much on the report. Section 1 gives an outline of the progress that we've made to date. As we've already discussed there, we've planned the audit, we've done some interim work, and essentially, due to the new guidance around the deadlines, we're still going ahead as normal. We plan to commence the audit proper in second week of July and work to the timetable that we'd already agreed. In terms of what's happened with regard to COVID, there will be a bit more extra focus on areas around property valuations, potentially on financial planning for the coming years. Obviously, the impact of CV-19 is a little bit unknown at the moment as to how that's going to play out. So we will be trying to flush that through the audit this year as well. In regard to the change deadlines, I was going to give you an update, but I think that's been covered enough to say that the date for the audited accounts is now the 30th of November. So we've got a lot longer to get this over the line. We'll be doing the audit, but it will be remotely. So hopefully things will still be okay, but it gives us a bit of contingency should things slip. Not that we are planning for that to happen. The second part of the report gives some useful publications that were probably relevant back in March. Obviously, those have been superseded by events, particularly around COVID, and obviously the change in deadline dates. So I don't propose to go into any of that in any detail, but if you've got any questions, please let me know.
Okay, so I'm just reading through the audit appointments paper. Has anyone got any questions or comments to the external auditor? No. So obviously I'm very keen, if we can, to close down the accounts this time on time. I would like us to do so. Obviously there's plenty for everybody else to be getting on with, so it would be good to get that out of the way and make sure that we're shipshape and ready for the next iteration, because presumably obviously the finances moving forward are a little bit more challenging, aren't they, given that we've got a COVID response and we're having to subsidise public transport to quite a degree. How are we tackling that then, Angela?
Thank you. Yes, we obviously, we allude to it in the next report a little, where we're closing down the current year, the old year, sorry. Not much changed in that year because the impact of COVID was very late on in that financial year. We have a budget for the current year. It was agreed by the Combined Authority in February. Clearly, when we set that, we didn't know what was waiting for us around the corner. So we have been doing some work on forecasting, looking at what our loss of income is and what our increased costs are. We did an initial forecast earlier in April to get a bit of a scale of what this could mean for us if the COVID restrictions continued for a full year. So we've scaled it at 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. At a full year, we are looking at up to £12 million loss. That's a combination of loss of income and additional costs, which clearly we need to address, we need to do something about. Part of that is about lobbying government for support in the way that they have provided support in different sectors and to other organisations. We haven't yet seen any direct government support for the gaps in our budget. It's early in the year, but we clearly can't wait. So we will be looking at options of what we can do, how we can address the gap, what options we have around the use of reserves, for example, what options we have to stop spending in certain areas, although we are following government guidance in terms of the supplier support. So much of our money is still going out the door in line with those supplier notices. So our proposals will come back to bring some proposals to the budget working group, that to then be brought to combined authority for some decisions.
Thank you. I mean, obviously in local authorities, we've had the same impacts on our revenues, our trading income, as well as the additional costs. And that's obviously no different to the combined authority. I noticed the other night on the television, the Prime Minister talked about please avoid public transport, which is obviously there is a cost to people avoiding public transport as well, as we still have to keep public transport going, of course, for key workers who desperately need it. So there's obviously a financial challenge there for any combined authority that provides transport. That's all the transport authorities in the country, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's worth noting that I have written on behalf of the combined authority to the Minister asking for how that gap might be addressed. So combined authorities and local authorities all have a gap in this, and we must continue our strong lobbying to make sure that the money that is being lost and also being spent to get our residents through this crisis is fully recouped at the end of this crisis, if not before. So, and that obviously has an impact on our internal audits and external audits, doesn't it? So we need to keep pushing on that. Any further questions? I'm just aware that I've strayed into another paper, haven't I, very naughtily. So I just want to obviously make sure that item 7, we're happy with that before we close that down. Are people happy with that paper? I'm seeing nods, so thank you very much. That is passed, item 7. Moving on now to then item 8, which is the compliance and monitoring report. Angela, did you want to start this?
I will, thank you. So this is the standard report you get each meeting, talking about internal controls and some monitoring information. So there haven't, the usual line in this is there haven't been significant changes to internal controls. However, to note that we have made some modifications to standing orders in response to COVID. We have put some changes in place in terms of the ability to approve documents electronically rather than on paper. They've all been properly documented and signed off. And arrangements such as this for us to be able to hold virtual meetings required change to standing orders, which has been taken through the proper processes. We included, there's a brief update on treasury management. At the moment, we are, our treasury management arrangements are fine. I know we're not facing immediate cash losses, so we are managing on with the cash balances that we have from our capital programme. So we're keeping an eye on the cash situation. Key indicators all up to date. As we said before, people are able to work from home, so we have there has been no slip in terms of completing month-end returns and key controls. Pages 58, 59 straight into the revenue budget, which we touched on in the previous item. Clearly the auditors will be interested in what our plans are for the coming year, that they need as part of their audit work to look at how we are responding, how our medium-term financial strategy is bearing up under the strain of COVID. And so there is clearly work that we need to do on the current year budget. For the year that has just ended, we hope to be roughly in line with what we previously forecast, maybe slightly over, but those final figures are still coming in. There should be a final position later this month. Confirmation that the business plan and budget were approved in February. Inclusion on this agenda, you've got the capital strategy, item 2.14. You considered a capital strategy last year, which was then approved by the combined authority. We agreed to update it annually, so this is this year's update. It's had a few minor changes to it. It is likely to undergo a bit more of a significant change as we move next year to becoming a mayoral combined authority, and that is likely to have an impact on how we view our capital strategy, and we'll bring that back at an early occasion for input. The last section is then around risk management. So you approved at the last meeting a corporate risk management strategy, which gave us a slightly different way of looking at our risks and how we evaluate them. So we have updated the risk register and that is attached as one of the appendices. We're clearly now also looking at that again, the senior team, in light of COVID and what new risks that brings us. The financial one is already in there writ large. COVID just brings a different dimension to it, but we're looking at what are the risks that COVID brings to us, and are we taking all the right actions. So that will be fully updated for your next meeting. So I'll pause there. There's a number of items in there, and happy to take any questions.
So, I mean, how dynamic, for example, is the risk management document? Because obviously we're going through now a phased sort of reopening of some services, and therefore risks are changing all the time. So public transport, for example, is one of our major services. And how are we making sure that we keep on top of those risks?
We have been undertaking risk assessment of all our locations. And that's in line, actually, we've been ahead of the advice that came out yesterday is clearly that you have to have a documented and published risk assessment when you're reopening places of work. So we've undertaken a risk assessment for the office, which is largely closed other than for pre-arranged visits to undertake any work that cannot be done remotely, for example, signing documents under seal. We've also done risk assessments at the bus stations. So they've got ways of working in place that seeks to protect both the people we have working for us and also seek to protect members of the public as best we can. They are being reviewed almost weekly, if not daily, to reflect latest guidance. So there are updates to those happening on as you say, it's a fairly iterative basis because the guidance in the situation is changing, but we are undertaking those risk assessments that set out the actions we're taking and why.
And have we got additional resource on risk management at the moment then, given the larger scale of the work?
Not per se. I think it'd be fair to, we've redeployed staff to ensure there are sufficient people, for example, supporting the bus stations, and so they can consider what they need to do and respond. In terms of formal writing up of the risk assessment, our health and safety team are supporting the managers who are doing that, and our gold senior management team are signing off on the risk assessments that are taking place.
Okay, and capital strategy, obviously that is going to be part of our economic recovery. Really, we will have to review the capital strategy, because presumably we wanted to bring some things forward, whereas other projects may be delayed for unknown reasons, COVID reasons. How are we keeping that again as a dynamic document, even though we have to sign off the strategy? How do we make sure that's flexible enough to deal with the current state of affairs?
Good question. The capital strategy sort of sets the framework for us to take our decisions. It sets out the sorts of things we would do. I think you're right that the current situation may mean we want to flex that and look at it differently. I think we'll be looking for direction for that from the work happening through the Economic Recovery Board to help shape where do we need to make changes. We're also obviously in parallel looking at our own capital programs about what has been able to be delivered until this week, when the construction industry have been asked to go back to work. There were clearly some projects progressing and some not. But the team, Melanie's team, are looking at the projects we've got, how deliverable they are in the current situation, and we'll be coming back with, do we need to flex the programme or change it in response, either to COVID initially or as part of the recovery. We also then have devolution to play into this, where we'll probably have access to different funding from next year. And that again might influence where we want to put our capital.
And then we've got budgets, of course. So we've obviously referred to that in the previous conversation, but again, we passed a budget quite recently, but that is now obviously not going to be workable for this year. So when did you say, obviously we're going to have a budget working group on that, but at what point could that come back to this committee?
We'll be able, the next meeting of this committee should be the end of July. We'll bring something back then.
Okay, so personally I think we need to see obviously revised budgets, capital strategy, and probably updated risk management then, given that all those things are quite key documents.
Yeah.
And they're all quite obviously subject to change in this environment. Any more
That's fine.
questions, comments from people? Yes, Councillor Hall. Sorry, Councillor Hall, I can't hear you. No, we can't hear you. I don't know why.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry about that. I'm having trouble with my technology. In fact, the first comment was about the technology, funnily enough. I think we ought to congratulate staff in the governance service for being quick on the ball to get us up and running again with the virtual meetings, and also with the governance side of it. It wasn't very long into the lockdown before we had a complete paper through to say how decisions were going to be made and how we had to adapt and all this kind of thing. And I think we were actually ahead of the game compared to a lot of the public sector organisations on that. So I think we did that well. So thank you. And the second comment was just following up on the capital plan. With a lot that was expected to be delivered this year, particularly in terms of transport and highways, how much of that would have been delivered by the constituent councils, and are they what's the word? Are they all responded in the same way? So have we got works going on somewhere and works not going on somewhere else, or as the family of local councils, are they all responded in the same way to trying to get the work done?
I believe they are. There are discussions happening on a regular basis with each local authority, because, as you say, all the local authorities are delivering a large proportion of the capital projects. I think some of it depends on the nature of the project. So some of the highways ones have continued. I think some of the rail, park and ride have been slowed down, and that is down to the ability of the contractor to work safely. Clearly, we can't have work progressing if the contractor feels they can't do that safely or get the supplies they need. But a significant number of projects have been able to progress, and clearly everybody is keen to see as much progress as we can on these projects.
You're right with that, Councillor Hall? Thank you. Any other questions, comments? No, I think that's it. I think given the state of the economy nationally, I think we might have to review our appetite for risk, because if you think about it, I'm not sure the private sector is going to be very keen to invest, and therefore it is going to be a much greater role for the public sector to stimulate the economy, both nationally and regionally. So we probably need to have a conversation in a workshop about what our appetite to risk is as well. So perhaps that's something we can arrange for next time. Any more questions, comments before we? No, so I think what we're saying is for now those are fine, but they're not going to last the entire year, I'm afraid. So they will need revisiting at the next meeting, but for now that's fine. I'm seeing nods, so that's okay. Thank you very much. Moving on then to item number 9, which is a more positive paper, which is about devolved adult education budget, which given the devolved settlement the leaders have negotiated, that will be coming to the combined authority to spend and directly commission from next year. Angela, are you starting on this point, or you're muted, Angela? You
I am. Thank you. Yeah, just briefly to say that the report is here as it sets out on page 102. There are some implications for internal audit and for the Governance and Audit Committee, and that's why the paper's here today. Bron is probably much closer to this than I am, but the report is here setting out the fact that there are things you need to be aware of and understand will impact the work of internal audit. These are part of the readiness conditions that we have to demonstrate to government, which is part of the process for them having the confidence to hand across to us the adult education budget from next year. Happy to pause if Bron wants to add anything, or if there are any questions.
Bron, do you want to come in? Because obviously this is new to us. Other combined authorities already directly commission adult education budget. It'll be coming for us the first time next year. There is quite a lot of work to do in preparation for that. But do you want to just outline the sort of details of what we need to be cited on?
Okay, so from the audit committee's point of view, you need to have an understanding of the kind of the two impacts on internal audit and then what governance and audit committee is being asked to have oversight of. Effectively, we are providing some advice and guidance support at this stage in developing the work streams, the controls, the way in which things are actually going to be rolled out and what kind of compliance structures are going to be put in place. So there's quite a big ask from internal audit, and there's some resource that we've already put into the programme, and we'll be backfilling our audit team to take account of that. So we're quite heavily involved in that kind of development phase at the moment. So we are separating that out though from what we will be doing from an internal audit assurance point of view. So we are going to make sure that, and if I refer back to the plan, when we put in there a sort of a provision for devolution type activity, AEB was the first one that we identified as an area that we would have to build in some early assurance work around. So it's a two-edged thing at the moment from an internal audit perspective. One, it's putting in all the advice and guidance stuff at the beginning to make sure that what is developed is sound and good and has sufficient control structures going forward and is supportable for the combined authority. And then secondly, from an internal audit point of view, what assurance can we give this committee that that is being done appropriately? So we're putting a bit of a Chinese wall between the person that's working on the advice and guidance side of it, and we will have a different auditor doing the assurance of it. From the audit committee's point of view, it's about you just being aware that this is a major new stream of work for the authority. It is being project managed from within the economic services team. It's been headed up by Michelle Burton, who has a lot of experience on the employment and skills side of things. And we are sitting on that board, so we are keeping an oversight of that. But in terms of the readiness check that Angela talked about, it is important that this committee is both aware of what is being done and is content to be kept in the loop from an oversight perspective. So we would expect you to be seeing in our progress updates in the future a regular specific bit of information on the adult education budget. It's a big ask to be ready in time for next year, so we are going to put enough time and resource into this to make sure that it's done correctly. I'll stop there so that anyone can ask me a question.
Thank you. My understanding is there's quite a lot of reporting required to central government as a result of us having the devolved budget. It is £63 million a year, so it's a significant amount of money, but presumably it is the level of reporting that makes the auditing also more complex. Am I right in that?
It's partly that, and it's partly the fact that the compliance structure that we build and the checks that we do will be sort of taken out external to WYCA. So it will be a case of making sure that where, for example, training providers and colleges, etc., are providing adult education budget related activities, that we have a proper compliance structure in place to check that. It's not to say internal audit will necessarily be doing that. That's part of what we're working with the project team to design and develop. But we certainly need to have enough oversight for us to be able to give assurance. So
it's setting up the systems really that everybody can follow and operate on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. So it's important that if we get that right now, it's going to make life a lot easier in the future.
Absolutely. Any more questions or comments of Bron? No, I'm not seeing anybody indicating. So I think obviously we're all pleased to have the opportunity of the adult education budget and to commission that internally. And make sure we get the right skills delivered to the right people for the right industries. So there's a real opportunity there. So, but very important, as you say, we get the right practices in now so that when the running of the contracts are in place, that goes smoothly. And obviously that's from next year. So the recommendations on this report, let me just get it up again.
It's to note the report and the assurances.
The report and the assurances. And Bron, do you say you're going to bring that back again? When is the appropriate time to bring that back?
I think what I'd quite like to do is just in our progress updates is make sure that we have a section on the AEB work, just so that there is, if necessary, only a brief update if there isn't a lot to to really bring to the Governance and Audit Committee's attention. But I would like to be able to give that assurance centrally to government as well, that we are making sure that those channels of communication and oversight stay open.
Okay, fine. Well, happy to make sure that happens. And if you could just note that. And I think, just looking at the agenda, if we're all happy with that report, and I'm seeing nods, then that concludes the meeting for today, unless anybody's anything else they need to mention before we close. No. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for your cooperation. I'm sorry I froze a little bit at the beginning. I don't know what that was about. But thank you very much, and I shall see you all at the next meeting. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.